You guys just keep asking for the more Reddit stories. So, I'm ready with the new tale. Let's read some cool, interesting cheating wife Reddit stories. And guys, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subs before the end of the year, and I think we can do it. So please subscribe and let's get straight into this one.
I always thought my wife, Jessica, was the epitome of stability. She wasn't the kind of woman who sought out attention or excitement beyond our life together. Our marriage had its ups and downs like any other, but for the most part, it was solid. Or so I thought. The trouble started a month before the bachelorette party. Jessica had been buzzing with excitement about her best friend Kara's wedding. Kara and Jessica had been inseparable since college, and I understood why this was a big deal for her. When she mentioned the bachelorette weekend, a night out with Kara and her bridal party, I didn't bat an eye. Go have fun, I told her, waving off any concerns. Jessica deserved a good time, and I trusted her completely. The night of the party, I stayed home with the dog, looking forward to a quiet evening. She kissed me goodbye, her lips glossed and cherry red. I watched her leave, the faint click of her heels echoing down the driveway, and then settled into my usual routine: beer, Netflix, and a quick check of my work emails. The hours slipped by uneventfully until my phone buzzed. It was a photo in the group chat Kara's fiancé had created for their wedding planning updates. Apparently, some of the groomsmen had joined the bachelorette group at a nightclub. The picture showed Jessica, laughing and holding a cocktail, sandwiched between two shirtless male strippers. The message underneath read, "Girls' night gone wild." At first, I chuckled. Jessica had always been shy about those things: strip clubs, risque entertainment. It wasn't her scene. But something about the photo nagged at me. Her expression was different. Carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years, her hand resting on one of the stripper's chests, fingers just a little too intimate. I told myself not to overthink it. It was harmless fun, right? That's what these parties were for. But the longer I stared at the photo, the more that unease grew. When Jessica came home that night, it was late, much later than I expected. Her hair was slightly disheveled, her makeup smudged, and she avoided meeting my eyes when she walked in. "How was it?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "It was wild," she said, her laugh nervous, almost forced. "Kara had the time of her life. We danced, drank a little too much. You know how it is." I smiled, trying to push past the sinking feeling in my gut. "Sounds like fun." She nodded quickly, kissed my cheek, and disappeared into the bathroom. Her avoidance was palpable, but I didn't press. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe I was imagining things. The next morning, Jessica was unusually quiet. She spent most of the day glued to her phone, her thumb flicking rapidly across the screen as if she were erasing something. When I walked into the room, she quickly locked the screen and smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. I let it slide, but that gnawing suspicion didn't go away. It wasn't until a week later that the real cracks began to show. I was vacuuming the living room when her phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up, revealing a message preview. "Last night was unforgettable. Wish we could do it again. Jason Blackheart." Jason? I didn't recognize the name. My heart began to pound, but I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Jason was someone from the party, a bartender, or one of Kara's friends. But as the days went on, Jessica grew more distant. She spent more nights catching up with Kara, and more mornings returning home late. My temper, already hot, began simmering just beneath the surface. What the hell was going on? Jessica's late nights and guarded behavior weren't just red flags, they were full-blown warning sirens. I couldn't shake the image of that text from Jason, nor the way Jessica had been acting since the bachelorette party. Still, I wanted to believe in her, in us. After all, we had been through so much together. We had built a life, a home. I wasn't ready to see it all crumble. But doubts are insidious things. Once they take root, they spread. One evening, Jessica was out, meeting Kara to finalize wedding details. As I sat alone, nursing a glass of whiskey, my mind churned over every detail from that weekend. Her hurried explanations, her reluctance to talk about the party, it all seemed too convenient. The memory of her locking her phone so quickly when I walked into the room lingered like a bitter taste. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up her phone. She always left it charging in the kitchen, but now it was guarded like Fort Knox. I searched through her usual spots and found nothing. But then, like a hunter following a trail, I noticed her gym bag was slightly unzipped on the hallway bench. I reached inside and found it, her phone, tucked under a pair of workout leggings. It was password protected, of course, but she wasn't exactly creative. After 3 tries, I was in. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages. Most were mundane, chats with Kara, her mom, and coworkers. But when I opened a thread labeled Jason, my blood ran cold. The first few messages seemed innocent enough, jokes about the party, light banter about their dance moves. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted. Jason, that night was insane. You've got moves I wasn't expecting. Jessica, haha, well, the tequila might have helped. Jason, we should get together sometime, just the 2 of us. What do you think? Jessica, I don't know, Jason. That might be a little dangerous. My grip tightened on the phone as I scrolled faster, the conversation unfolding like a nightmare. Their messages were laced with flirtation, subtle at first but growing bolder with every exchange. Jason, you can't deny there was something between us that night. Jessica, I'm not denying anything. I just don't know if it's a good idea to explore it. Jason, sometimes the best things in life are bad ideas. Her reply was the one that hit me the hardest. Jessica, maybe you're right. But it has to stay between us. The most recent message, sent just a few hours ago, confirmed my worst fears. Jason, looking forward to Saturday. Same spot? Jessica, I'll be there. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. She was meeting him again. And judging by the tone of their messages, this wasn't the first time. My chest burned with fury, my fists clenching so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I slammed her phone down on the counter, pacing the room like a caged animal. Every rational thought in my head screamed at me to confront her, to demand an explanation. But I knew better. If I stormed into this blindly, she would lie, twist the story, try to make me doubt what I had seen. No, I needed more. Proof that she couldn't talk her way out of. The next day, Jessica acted like nothing was wrong. She kissed me goodbye on her way out, her usual bright smile plastered on her face. It was almost enough to make me question everything. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But then I remembered the messages. The emojis. The winking smile. Where are you going today? I asked casually, sipping my coffee. Just errands, she said quickly. Then I'm meeting Kara later. Kara again, huh? You two are glued at the hip lately, I said with a forced chuckle. Jessica's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. Well, weddings take a lot of planning. You wouldn't understand. Her words stung, but I didn't let it show. I waved her off with a casual, "Have fun," and watched as she left, her phone tucked firmly into her purse. As soon as the door closed, I grabbed my jacket and car keys. It was time to follow her. I trailed her from a safe distance, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. She drove across town, making a few stops at places that seemed innocent enough, a coffee shop, a boutique. But then she turned into a small parking lot behind a nondescript building. My stomach dropped when I saw him, Jason. He leaned against his car, that cocky grin plastered across his face. Jessica pulled up beside him, and they exchanged a quick embrace, far too intimate to be just friends. They talked for a moment, laughing about something I couldn't hear. Then Jason opened the passenger door of his car, and Jessica climbed in. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I had loved and trusted for years, sitting in another man's car, smiling and laughing like a carefree teenager. I wanted to storm over, drag her out of that car, and demand answers. But I forced myself to stay put. I needed to know how far this had gone. After a few minutes, the car pulled out of the parking lot. I followed at a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared for whatever I was about to uncover. They drove to a quiet motel on the outskirts of town. Jason parked, and they both got out, heading inside without a second glance. My hands trembled as I parked down the street, watching from a distance. I sat there for what felt like hours, the truth sinking in like a stone in my gut. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. Jessica was cheating on me, right under my nose. I sat in my car outside the motel, staring at the entrance as the minutes crawled by. I wanted to burst through those doors, to confront them, to drag Jessica out and demand answers. But my head was warring with my heart. I needed proof, something undeniable, something she couldn't manipulate or twist into a misunderstanding. As I waited, the rage within me grew, simmering like a pot about to boil over. Every memory of our life together, our wedding day, the vacations, the quiet nights cuddled on the couch, played in my mind like a cruel joke. How could she throw it all away for some fling? How could she betray me like this? But Jessica was good at keeping secrets. I couldn't risk her slithering out of this with half-truths and crocodile tears. No, I needed to play this smart. When Jason's car finally pulled out of the parking lot an hour later, I was ready. Jessica was in the passenger seat, her hair slightly tousled, her smile lazy and satisfied in a way that made my stomach churn. I followed them back to the parking lot where her car was parked. They exchanged a quick kiss before Jessica got into her vehicle and drove off, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I didn't follow her this time. Instead, I tailed Jason. I wanted to know more about the man who had inserted himself into my marriage, who had taken what wasn't his to take. His car led me to a small suburban neighborhood, where he parked in the driveway of a modest house. I watched as he went inside, noting the address. My fingers itched to knock on his door and confront him then and there, but I knew better. This wasn't the time. Back at home, Jessica was acting like nothing had happened. She greeted me with a smile, kissed my cheek, and launched into some story about how stressful wedding planning was. I listened, nodding at all the right moments, biting back the urge to call her out. My patience was paper-thin, but I couldn't let her see the cracks yet. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. "Yeah," I replied with a forced smile. "Just a long day at work." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and turned her attention back to her phone. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, wondering how I'd ever missed the signs. Was this the first time? Or had there been others before Jason? The thought made my blood boil. Over the next few days, I hatched my plan. I wasn't going to confront her until I had everything I needed, solid, irrefutable proof. I hired a private investigator to dig into Jason's background. Who was he? Was he married? Did he have a family? And most importantly, how long had this been going on? The PI worked fast. Within 48 hours, I had a file on Jason that painted a pretty damning picture. He was a serial cheater, hopping from one woman to the next, with no regard for the chaos he left in his wake. He wasn't married, but he had a history of breaking up relationships. His confidence was built on destroying other men's lives, and I wasn't about to let him add me to his list of conquests. Armed with this information, I waited for the right moment. Jessica's lies were piling up, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she slipped. That moment came sooner than I expected. One evening, Jessica left her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. My heart pounded as I picked it up, scrolling through her messages with Jason. They were planning another rendezvous for the weekend, but this time, Jason wanted to take things up a notch. Jessica: "What do you mean?" Jason: "You'll see. Trust me, it's going to be unforgettable." Jessica: "You're bad, Jason. I can't wait." I snapped screenshots of their messages and sent them to my own phone. Then I went a step further. I found Jason's number and saved it. If things went as planned, I would use it soon. The weekend arrived, and Jessica was all smiles as she left the house, claiming she had a bridesmaids meeting with Kara. I wished her good luck, watching her drive away with a forced calm. Once she was gone, I made my move. I texted Jason from a burner phone, posing as Jessica. Change of plans? Meet me at the house instead. I've got something special planned for us. He responded almost immediately. Damn, girl. Can't say no to that. Be there in 30. Perfect. When Jason arrived, I was ready. I had set the stage, making it look like Jessica had planned an intimate evening. Candles flickered on the coffee table, music played softly in the background, and I sat in the darkened living room, waiting for him to walk through the door. He knocked once before letting himself in, clearly comfortable in his role as the intruder. When he saw me sitting there instead of Jessica, his cocky grin faltered. Who the hell are you? He asked, his voice laced with confusion. I stood slowly, my rage barely contained. I'm her husband, I said, my tone cold enough to freeze the room. And you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Jason froze. For a moment, the arrogance drained from his face, replaced by confusion and a flicker of fear. But it didn't take long for his cocky demeanor to resurface. He gave a nervous laugh, glancing around the dimly lit living room. Look, man, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. Misunderstanding? I repeated, my voice a low growl. You mean like you misunderstood the fact that Jessica is a married woman? That misunderstanding? Jason hesitated, his smirk faltering. I didn't know she was married. Don't lie to me, I snapped, stepping closer. You knew exactly who she was and what you were doing. You think I didn't see the texts? The motel visits? The little inside jokes about me being clueless? His face paled at that, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Look, man, I didn't mean for things to go this far. Shut up, I interrupted, my voice like a whip. You don't get to explain yourself. You don't get to justify what you've done. You don't even get to breathe in my house without my permission. Jason took a step back, but I wasn't finished. Do you know what kind of man you're dealing with? Do you have any idea what you've walked into? I leaned in closer, my fists clenched at my sides. You thought you could come into my life, take what's mine, and just walk away without consequences? I'm sorry. Jason stammered, his bravado completely shattered. I'll leave. I won't come near her again, I swear. You're damn right you won't, I said, my voice ice cold. But leaving isn't enough. You're going to feel the weight of what you've done. Jason didn't wait to find out what I meant. He bolted for the door, nearly tripping over the coffee table in his haste. I let him go. There was no need to lay a hand on him, not yet anyway. His panic, his fear, was satisfying enough for now. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Once he was gone, I turned my attention to the next phase of my plan, Jessica. She came home later that evening, humming softly to herself as she walked through the door. Her hair was freshly styled, her makeup touched up. She'd clearly been out somewhere, though she'd probably claim it was with Kara. Hey, she said brightly, setting her purse on the counter. How was your day? I didn't answer. I just stared at her, my expression blank. It took her a moment to notice the tension in the room, but when she did, her smile faded. What's wrong? She asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. Sit down, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. She hesitated, glancing at me warily. Why? What's going on? Sit down. I pointed to the couch, and after a moment of hesitation, she obeyed. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of evidence I had gathered. The screenshots of her texts with Jason. Photos of them together at the motel. The video from the security camera outside our house, showing Jason walking up to the front door just hours earlier. I handed her the phone and watched as her face went pale. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the images, her lips moving soundlessly as if trying to form words. Care to explain? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It's not what it looks like, she finally managed, her voice shaky. Don't insult me by lying, I said, my anger bubbling to the surface. I have proof. I've seen the messages, the photos. I know everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head. I didn't mean for this to happen. It was just, Jason was a mistake. A stupid, stupid mistake. A mistake? I repeated, my voice rising. A mistake is spilling coffee on your shirt. Sneaking around with another man for weeks, months, isn't a mistake, Jessica. It's a choice. A deliberate, calculated choice. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice hard. You tore our marriage apart, you lied to my face, and you betrayed everything we built together. For what? For him? She didn't answer. Her silence spoke louder than any words ever could. For a long moment, the room was silent, save for Jessica's quiet sobs. I stared at her, feeling a mixture of rage, betrayal, and something else, something darker, welling up inside me. This is how it's going to work, I finally said, my voice steady but cold. You're going to pack your things and leave. Tonight. Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face filled with panic. Please don't do this. We can fix this. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just give me a chance. It's too late for that, I said, shaking my head. You made your choice, Jessica. Now you have to live with it. But I love you, she cried, her voice desperate. I was stupid, but I love you. Doesn't that mean anything? It used to, I said quietly. But love isn't enough when there's no trust. And I'll never trust you again. As Jessica packed her bags, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The woman I had loved, the life we had shared, it was all gone now, replaced by something raw and broken. But as she walked out the door that night, her tearful apologies echoing in the empty hallway, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. Not for her. And definitely not for Jason. The silence of the house after Jessica left was deafening. It wasn't just the absence of her presence, it was the void where my trust, my love, and my life once stood. But that emptiness quickly filled with something else, a cold, calculated resolve. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If Jessica and Jason thought they'd walk away unscathed, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I started with Jason. Thanks to the private investigator's report, I knew everything about him, his job, his circle of friends. It turned out he worked as a mid-level manager at a local tech company. He had built his career on charm and connections, and his professional reputation was his lifeblood. Armed with this knowledge, I put my plan into action. I created an anonymous email account and sent a detailed message to his employer. It included screenshots of his texts with Jessica, a few photos of them together at the motel, and a polite note about how unprofessional it was for someone in his position to engage in such behavior. I made sure to copy HR, his boss, and the company's CEO. A few hours later, I got a notification. My email had been forwarded multiple times. By the end of the week, Jason was fired. But I wasn't done with him yet. Jason was also an aspiring influencer. He had a curated Instagram feed full of motivational quotes, gym selfies, and carefully posed photos of himself pretending to be an adventurous bachelor. I took the same evidence I had sent to his employer and anonymously shared it with a few local gossip forums. I made sure to highlight his pattern of predatory behavior, painting him as a cheater who preyed on married women. The fallout was immediate. His follower count plummeted, and his carefully constructed image was shattered. Comments flooded his posts, calling him out for his behavior. He tried to delete the posts, but the internet never forgets. Next, it was Jessica's turn. I wasn't content to simply let her walk away. She had destroyed our marriage, but she wasn't going to move on without consequences. First, I blocked her from all my accounts. No more teary late-night texts or desperate calls. Then I contacted a lawyer, one of the best in the state. I laid everything out, the affair, the evidence, and my intention to file for divorce. The lawyer assured me we had a strong case and that I could protect my assets. Jessica had nowhere to go but her parents' house after I kicked her out. I knew they'd be less than thrilled when they learned what she had done. So, I made sure they found out. I sent her mother an email, apologizing for the way things had turned out but explaining why our marriage had ended. I attached a few of the tamer screenshots, just enough to get the point across. The next time Jessica called me, she was hysterical. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed. "My parents are furious. They won't even let me stay here now." "You did this to yourself," I replied coldly. "Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences?" But the piece de resistance came when I decided to confront Jessica's closest friend, Kara, the bride-to-be. Kara had always been a staunch supporter of our marriage, and I doubted she knew the full extent of Jessica's betrayal. I reached out to her under the guise of needing closure and casually dropped the bombshell about the affair. Kara's reaction was exactly what I had expected: shock, outrage, and disgust. She had trusted Jessica as her maid of honor, but upon learning about her behavior, she wasted no time cutting ties. Jessica was removed from the wedding party and uninvited from the ceremony altogether. I later found out from mutual friends that Jessica's social circle began to unravel after that. Word spread fast, and soon, she was isolated, her once vibrant social life reduced to whispers and sideways glances. Despite everything, there was still one final piece of the puzzle. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica hadn't told me the whole truth about her affair with Jason. How long had it really been going on? Were there others before him? The more I thought about it, the more I needed answers. So, I reached out to the private investigator again. I asked him to dig deeper into Jessica's past, her texts, her emails, her social media accounts. What he uncovered only fueled my determination. Jason wasn't the first. There had been another man, someone she had met at her gym a year ago. Their relationship had been short-lived, but the pattern was clear. Jessica had been seeking attention outside our marriage for far longer than I realized. When I confronted her with this information, her response was predictably defensive. "You were always so angry," she said, her voice trembling. "You never had time for me. I was lonely. Don't you dare try to blame this on me," I snapped. "You had every chance to talk to me, to work through our issues like adults. Instead, you chose to lie, to cheat, to destroy everything we built." Jessica broke down in tears, begging for forgiveness. But by then, I felt nothing for her. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger I couldn't even recognize. In the end, I got everything I wanted from the divorce. The house, the car, and the majority of our savings were mine. Jessica walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back and the weight of her own mistakes. As for Jason, he moved out of town shortly after losing his job. His reputation was in tatters, and I made sure to keep it that way. Every time he tried to rebuild his image, I was there to remind people of who he really was. And me? I walked away from it all stronger, wiser, and unshackled from the lies that had bound me. Jessica and Jason had thought they could break me, but they were wrong. They didn't realize they were playing with fire. Jessica's downfall came faster than even I had anticipated. With nowhere to live and her social circle crumbling, she quickly spiraled into a mess of desperation and regret. She called, texted, even showed up at the house once, begging me to reconsider. I didn't let her in. I couldn't. The woman sobbing on the other side of the door wasn't my wife anymore. She was a stranger who had burned every bridge between us. "Please, let me explain," she pleaded through the door. "We can fix this. I'll do anything. You've explained enough," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "Go find Jason. Maybe he can help you pick up the pieces." That was the last time she tried to contact me directly. The aftermath of my revenge wasn't clean. Word of Jessica's infidelity spread beyond her circle of friends and into the broader community. In our small town, gossip was a currency, and Jessica's actions became headline news among the locals. People whispered when they saw her in public. The once respected woman who had been at the center of every social event was now a pariah. Jessica's parents didn't take kindly to her betrayal either. After learning the truth, they offered little support, ashamed of the disgrace she had brought upon herself. I heard from mutual acquaintances that they had all but disowned her, leaving her to fend for herself. Meanwhile, Jason wasn't faring much better. The job market for disgraced ex-managers wasn't exactly booming, especially for someone whose personal life was a public scandal. His attempts to rebuild his image on social media were met with relentless trolling, courtesy of the evidence I had seeded online. I'd occasionally check in on his profiles, watching as his posts were flooded with comments like, "Still sleeping with married women, Jason?" Or, "How's unemployment treating you, champ?" The satisfaction was bittersweet. While I didn't regret my actions, I realized I was still tethered to the anger they had sparked. I was ready to let it go. Jessica, however, wasn't ready to let go of me. One night, weeks after the divorce was finalized, she showed up unannounced at the house again. This time, she looked different, frail, disheveled, and utterly broken. Her once vibrant energy had been replaced by a hollow emptiness. "Please, just hear me out," she said, her voice trembling as she stood in the doorway. I leaned against the frame, my arms crossed. "What do you want, Jessica?" I want to make things right," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. I've lost everything, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am." Her words might have meant something weeks ago, but now they felt empty. "It's too late for that," I said. "You didn't just hurt me, Jessica. You destroyed us. There's no going back." She nodded slowly, her tears spilling over. "I know. I wanted you to hear it from me." I closed the door on her, feeling no satisfaction, no victory. Just a deep, resounding emptiness. It was the last time I ever saw her. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into work, reconnected with old friends, and started therapy to unpack the emotional baggage Jessica had left behind. Slowly but surely, I began to feel like myself again. But the most unexpected turn came when Kara, Jessica's former best friend, reached out to me. She wanted to apologize for not seeing the signs sooner, for not warning me about Jessica's behavior. Over coffee, we talked about the betrayal, the aftermath, and the shared anger we both felt toward the woman who had upended our lives. "Jessica fooled us both," Kara said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "But honestly, you're better off without her. She's her own worst enemy." I couldn't argue with that. As much as I had loved Jessica once, I saw now that she had been running from her own insecurities, her own dissatisfaction, for far longer than I realized. I had just been collateral damage in her self-destruction. Jason eventually left town, unable to escape the shadow of his ruined reputation. Rumor had it he moved to another state, trying to start fresh where no one knew his name. But I had no intention of following his story anymore. Let him disappear. He wasn't my concern. As for Jessica, she faded from my life entirely. The occasional rumor would reach me. She was struggling to find work, bouncing between temporary living arrangements, trying to scrape together some semblance of stability. But I didn't revel in her misery. I had done what I set out to do, and now it was time to let go. One evening, months after it all began, I stood on my back porch, watching the sunset. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The anger, the betrayal, the need for revenge, it was all behind me now. I was free. As I sipped my drink, I thought about the lessons I had learned. Trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired. But resilience was stronger than betrayal. I had lost a marriage, but I had found myself in the process. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. The months after Jessica's departure were strange, almost surreal. The house felt too big, too quiet without her. At first, I avoided certain rooms: the bedroom, where we'd spent countless nights laughing and talking; the kitchen, where her humming used to fill the mornings. But as time went on, those spaces became just rooms again. The memories faded into the background, replaced by the life I was slowly rebuilding. I started taking better care of myself. I hit the gym more frequently, cooked meals that didn't involve the microwave, and even took up running. The physical exertion helped clear my mind, burning off the residual anger that occasionally flared up when I thought about her. Therapy, too, became a lifeline. My therapist, an older man with a quiet, steady demeanor, helped me process not just the betrayal but the deeper wounds I hadn't realized Jessica's actions had uncovered. "It's not about her anymore," he said one session, his voice calm but firm. "It's about you. What kind of life do you want to build now? Who do you want to be, now that you're free from her shadow?" I didn't have an answer then. But the question stayed with me. One afternoon, as I was reorganizing the house, I came across a box of Jessica's things I hadn't yet thrown out. It was filled with trinkets: a photo frame from our first vacation together, a silly ceramic mug she'd bought me as a joke, a stack of letters we'd exchanged in the early days of our relationship. I sat on the floor, going through them one by one, my emotions swinging wildly between nostalgia, sadness, and anger. But then I came across something unexpected: a small journal, tucked at the bottom of the box. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I wanted to see what was inside. But curiosity won out. The pages were filled with Jessica's handwriting, messy, looping, with occasional doodles in the margins. Most of the entries were mundane: notes about work, lists of things she wanted to buy, musings about movies she'd watched. But as I flipped further, the tone shifted. "I don't know what's wrong with me," one entry read. "Jake is everything I should want in a husband. He's kind, supportive, reliable. But sometimes I feel like I'm suffocating. Like I need something more, something different. Does that make me a bad person?" Another entry, written months before the affair began, was even harder to read. "I feel so guilty all the time. Jake deserves better than this version of me. But I can't seem to find my way back to the person I used to be. Maybe I never was that person." I closed the journal and set it aside, my chest heavy with a mix of emotions. Her words didn't absolve her of what she'd done, not by a long shot. But they added context, a glimpse into the cracks that had been forming long before Jason ever entered the picture. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Life continued, steady and uneventful. Work kept me busy, and I found joy in small things: weekend hikes, long drives with no destination, lazy Sundays spent reading. Slowly, the weight of Jessica's betrayal began to lift. The anger that had fueled me for so long faded into the background, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. One day, Kara reached out again, inviting me to a small gathering with some mutual friends. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was ready to re-enter the social scene. But she was persistent. "You need to get out of the house, Jake. It's time." I finally agreed, and that night turned out to be a turning point. Surrounded by familiar faces, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a spark of my old self return. Kara, ever the social butterfly, introduced me to everyone, including a woman named Lauren. Lauren was different from Jessica in almost every way: quiet, thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard. We spent most of the evening talking, and by the end of the night, I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't in months. Over the next few weeks, Lauren and I started seeing each other. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, more like a slow, steady burn. She was patient with me, understanding that I was still healing, and never pushed me to share more than I was ready to. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Do you still think about her?" I was quiet for a moment, considering my answer. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Not in the way I used to, though. It's more like echoes. Faint reminders of what happened. But they don't hurt as much anymore." Lauren nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's good. You deserve to move on, Jake. You deserve to be happy. Her words stayed with me long after she'd gone home that night. For so long, I'd defined myself by the betrayal, the anger, the need for revenge. But now, I realized, I had a chance to start over. To build a life that wasn't weighed down by the past. Jessica and Jason had thought they could break me. And for a while, they almost did. But standing on the other side of it all, I saw the truth. I was stronger than their lies, stronger than their betrayals. I had come out of the fire forged anew, ready to embrace whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I found myself smiling more, laughing more, living more. And for the first time in a long time, I was at peace. Months turned into a year, and life slowly stitched itself back together. My relationship with Lauren blossomed in a way that felt effortless. We were different people from different backgrounds, but there was a quiet understanding between us, a shared belief in the value of honesty, simplicity, and the kind of love that doesn't need grand gestures to feel real. Jessica was no longer a shadow over my life, though echoes of her betrayal still surfaced from time to time. Occasionally, I'd hear about her through mutual friends or see her in town, looking thinner, frilier, as though the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. She didn't approach me, and I didn't approach her. Whatever needed to be said between us had already been said. One evening, as Lauren and I sat by the fireplace, she handed me an envelope. "I wasn't sure when to give you this," she said, her voice soft. "But I think you're ready." I frowned, curious. Inside was a photograph of the two of us from a recent hike. I was mid-laugh, and she had her arm looped around mine, her face glowing with a smile. Tucked behind the photo was a handwritten note. "Jake, sometimes life breaks us in ways we can't control. But it's in those broken places that we find our strength. I know you've been through hell, but I see the man you're becoming, stronger, wiser, kinder. I'm lucky to know you. Whatever comes next, I'm here. Lauren." I stared at the note, my chest tightening. For so long, I had defined myself by what I had lost. But now, I saw what I had gained, a second chance, a new beginning, and someone who believed in me even when I doubted myself. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means." Lauren smiled, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to thank me, Jake. Just promise me you'll keep moving forward." The next day, I received an unexpected message from Kara. She wanted to meet for coffee, saying there was something important we needed to discuss. I agreed, though curiosity gnawed at me. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already seated, her expression serious. "I wasn't sure whether to tell you this," Kara began, stirring her coffee absently. "But I think you deserve to know." "Know what?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "It's about Jessica. She's not doing well," Kara said, hesitating as though searching for the right words. "She's burned almost every bridge in her life. She's been staying with random friends, working odd jobs. Last I heard, she was trying to leave town." I leaned back in my chair, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, but the truth was, I didn't. Jessica's downfall wasn't a source of satisfaction anymore, it was just sad. "She asked about you," Kara added after a pause. "She wanted to know if you were okay. I think she regrets everything, Jake. But she knows it's too late to fix it." I nodded slowly, processing her words. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally. "But I don't think there's anything left to say to her." Kara reached across the table, resting her hand on mine. "You're a good man, Jake. Don't let what she did change that." In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on Jessica's fate. While I had no intention of reaching out to her, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. She had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. But as much as she had hurt me, I realized I didn't hate her anymore. Holding on to that anger had only weighed me down, and I was ready to let it go. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. One evening, as Lauren and I were walking through the park, I spotted Jessica sitting alone on a bench. She looked up and saw me, her eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, I considered walking past, pretending I hadn't seen her. But something stopped me. "I'll catch up with you," I told Lauren, squeezing her hand. She nodded, giving me a reassuring smile before continuing down the path. I approached Jessica, unsure of what to say. She looked up at me, her face a mixture of guilt and longing. "Jake," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Jessica," I replied, my tone even. "How are you?" She let out a bitter laugh. "Do you really want to know?" I shrugged. "Maybe." She sighed, looking away. "Not great. But I guess you already knew that." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything. For hurting you, for betraying you. You didn't deserve any of it." "I know," I said simply. "But it's in the past now. We've both moved on." Jessica nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm glad you're happy, Jake. You deserve to be." I stood, ready to leave. "Take care of yourself, Jessica." "I mean it." She nodded again, watching as I walked away. For the first time, I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet sense of finality. Lauren was waiting for me at the edge of the park. As I reached her, she looked at me curiously. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, taking her hand. "Everything's okay." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it.
Oh my god. Another really good one. I really hope you enjoyed this Reddit story video. I had a great time reading this. If you want more of this kind of content, just leave a comment, let me know. Follow my channel. I'm really trying to hit 1,000 subs before the end of the year. And we can do it. It's going to happen, guys. Thank you so much. Now, everybody have a great night and have a sweet dreams.